Today, we are very thankful for the Embassy of Canada, the sponsor of this session. And I have the privilege of introducing Denis Chouinard. Thank you. Counselor of the Public Affairs of the Embassy of Canada, who is going to be the interviewer this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Beatrice. Welcome, everybody. It's really an honor to be with you tonight with Kim Thúy. Kim Thúy, welcome to Washington, D.C.
Again?
Again, because we met almost a year ago at the Embassy of Canada. There was an exhibit with paintings from René Durocher. The title was Diversity, Identity, and the paintings were inspired by the novels of Kim Thúy. So that was how we met a year ago.
But the paintings were more beautiful than the book.
That can be quite a discussion. As it was mentioned, if that's all right with you, I will conduct an interview with Kim Thúy. And around 6:30, we have two microphones. I will invite you to ask questions. Kim Thúy was born in Vietnam in 1968, and at the age of 10, she left Vietnam with a wave of refugees, commonly referred as the boat people, and settled with her family in Canada, in Quebec, in Granby, I believe, yes. Graduate in translation and law. She worked as a seamstress, interpreter, lawyer. You were the owner of a restaurant, and you were a food commentator on radio and television, and of course you're a writer. Kim Thúy is the recipient of a good number of awards, including in 2010, she received a Canada Governors General Literary Award for French language fiction with her first novel, Rue. And Rue was translated in at least 25 languages, which is extraordinary, exceptional, certainly, coming from a Canadian writer. Rue was followed in 2013, I believe, with your second novel, Man, and then Vie was published in 2016. And recently, this year, in English, Random House published Your Secrets from My Vietnamese Kitchen, the simple recipes from my many mothers. Can I ask you the first question?
Sure.
I would refer to Rue, your first novel, and my question would be, well, how did it flow out of you, how the Rue turned into words, how Rue became a novel?
First of all, I didn't know that I could write because I don't master any of the three languages that I kind of know. I still make a lot of mistakes, and French is a nightmare with tenses. For the verbs, because in Vietnamese you don't have tenses, you only have infinitive, right? And the French are so precise, more precise than the English, right? You have not only how do I say imparfait, passé composé, plus que parfait, just for past tense. And just that, I don't know where it is on the timeline, which comes first. And in French, you even have futur antérieur, meaning future and before. How can you be in the future and in the past at the same time?
Don't ask me.
Right? and I took one class, one creative writing class, and the professor asked me to go to his office because he gave me, basically for knowledge of French, 0. On 33%, and participation in class was also 0. And so he recommended that I change faculty, right? The only reason why I stayed was to fight against my mom, who said that I should become a doctor and not go into words. And she was right. You know how mothers are always right, and it's so annoying in a way. So I never thought that I would be able to write. And the book came to be really because I fell asleep a lot at red lights. And it's quite dangerous to fall asleep at red lights because not green lights. You know, when I'm driving, I'm fine, but at red lights, it's too long, and I just fall asleep. And when you fall asleep, your foot would get lighter, and the brake would release itself a little bit, and the car would move on its own. And so I had a couple of accidents like that, and the insurance company kind of stopped. Insuring me. And so one way, they were not big accidents, right? Because it was quite slow, but still.
Good news. That's good to know.
Yeah, so you can try. But maybe your spouses won't be happy, you know. And one way for me to stay awake was to take notes. And then at the beginning, they were just to-do lists, really. You know, what to buy tomorrow at the market. And I ran out of things to do. And so I had to invent new lists, right? Like a list of verbs that I knew, countries, cities, colors, all kinds of lists. And then I ran out of ideas for lists, and that's how I started writing, I guess. They were just notes. And it was a book. And then I really loved it, so I looked for red lights so that I could continue to write, right? Because when you get home, you have a zillion things to do, and you feel guilty to I felt guilty to just sit and play with words. But when you're at red lights, you're stuck. You cannot do anything else. Anyway, so that's how the book got started. And then I got 1 month of penalty at home, because I changed careers every 5 years, and my husband said that it was time for me to at 40 to know what I wanted to do and to have a dream career or something like that. And I didn't know what to dream for, and he forced me to stay home for 1 month as a penalty period. And no, but really, he said, this is your penalty period, just stay. And I put the notes in the computer, and then that month, you know, got to have another month and another month and another month. I just had more excuses because after 1 month, you're kind of behind. Your behind would take the shape of the chair, and you cannot no longer get up. You know, you just stay there. And then I didn't know it was a book. It was a friend of mine who took it to the publisher, and it became a book. And then I don't know what happened, you know, Europe, France bought it very quickly and gave it a prize very quickly. And then the other countries came along, and then now we're 39 countries. And sometimes there are countries that I didn't know existed. The publisher would tell me, Macedonia has just bought your book. And I said, that's not like, you know, vegetables, Macedonian something. And then she said, no, it's not a vegetable mix, it's the country. And so, so that's it.
Great. Well, that's a great story. She's a great story. She's a great storyteller, isn't she?
But that's the truth.
Yeah. And I remember, you know, I saw Rue in the bookstore. I read it, and then, you know, I met my sister. Did you read it? Yes, we read it. And then I met my colleagues. Did you read Rue, etc.? Yes, yes, yes. I read it in French. I'm just waiting for the English translation. The English translation came very quickly, and that was just, the novel was just everywhere, everywhere. And the French, which is used by, well, your French language, it's just beautiful. So I read the 3 novels, Rue, Man, and Vie, and I read, when preparing for this interview, extracts in English from the translations by Sheila Fishman. So the same translator did the translation from French to English. And, well, I found the same beauty, the same grace, the same soft tone in English as well. So my question, you know, would be, can you tell us about the the writers you admire. You know, if you compare your style to the authors that you admire, how would be this comparison? And secondly, the theme of this festival is change makers. So among the writers that you really like, who you would consider as being change makers? À vous.
Change makers. I will name you two authors that really, you know, they changed me as a person.
I see.
Marguerite Duras, who wrote The Lover, maybe you know of her, and she, it was the first book that we got to buy. When we left Vietnam in '78, so 3 years after the end of the war, you know, very often when you talk about the end of the war, you always think that peace would come right away, but actually there's a period, a transitional period, which creates a lot of chaos when you change not a political party, but a regime, you know, a political regime. Then everything just went upside down, and we were lucky enough to have a lot of books at home, and all those books became. How would I say it? They were considered to be anti-revolutionary or anti-cultural products, right, that could send you to prison. And so we had to burn books, and we had to, find ways to destroy them. And so when we arrived in Canada, we didn't have any money to buy books. And I didn't know the library system yet. And the first book that we got to buy was The Lover of Marguerite Duras, and it cost $15. And to us, it was enormous, because $15 could take care of our family in Vietnam for a whole month. So it felt so, you know, we felt so guilty, my uncle and I, to go buy this book. And he's 7 years older than I am. He could speak French before we arrived in Quebec. So his French was of a higher level than mine. I didn't understand much. So we went to buy this book. And he read the book with me sentence by sentence to explain to me why it was such a beautiful book. The language was very simple, but at the same time very deep. And you had to master French really well in order to write this way. And so he explained to me every sentence. And then my mom, she said the best way to learn a language is to write dictations. You know, that's how you say it, right? And because when you do a dictation, you need to analyze the structure of the language, right? Grammatically, comment on dit, syntax, la syntax, everything, like logical and all of that. So she made me write dictation from first page to the last page. And then, and also she said to learn a language, I had to learn it by heart, because every language has its own rhythm, has its own musicality. And the Vietnamese language is monosyllabic. We only have one syllable per word, whereas French and English is, in my mind, is horizontal, because you just add more syllables to make new words, right? Yeah, constitution, constitutional, constitutionally, anti-constitutionally, right? Really long. Whereas Vietnamese is the tones, you just go up and down, right, to create more words. And so she said, I had to learn it by heart so that I get the rhythm of the French language. So I learned it by heart from the first line to the last line. So what happened after this whole exercise, imagine this, I was 15 in high school, going to school and started talking like the book. I didn't know. So instead of saying to your friends, you know, oh, you look sad today, or you don't feel well or something, I said, oh, your face, devastated. You know, like, so I no longer had any friends. That's it. The high school was a nightmare. Everybody just left me, right? Like, oh my God, this girl is so funny. And in the book, she kept repeating, I'm 15 and a half years old, or some, j'ai 15 ans et demi. So when people asked me how old I was, I said the same thing. I'm 15 and a half. You know, like, and so that's the first book that really stayed with me. And I think some people would say that I write a little bit like Marguerite Duras with that rhythm. But I am Marguerite Duras free, for the last 20 years. Because if I start, reading her, then I would live like her, breathe like her, think like her. So she's on the last shelf that I cannot touch at all. So it's like an AA person,
Good to know.
Yeah, and the second author is Tim O'Brien, that you know. He wrote The Things They Carried, and he's important to me because what I understood from his book, from this book, and I have not read anything else of Tim O'Brien because I love this book so much that I don't want to be disappointed by anything else from him. And so I always have at least 10 copies of his book in my house so that I can give to anybody who would come into my house. You have to read this book. And he has taught me one thing, is that you can see beauty in everything. And I think beauty is the best vehicle to talk about atrocity. And because he described at one point that, when they patrol, the soldiers, well, he used to be, he's a veteran of the Vietnamese War, of Vietnam War, how to say that, yeah? As you know, here we call it Vietnam War. If you go to Vietnam, it's called the American War, but it's the same war, yeah? It's always about, perspective and the angle where we stand. And he said that the soldiers, they always walked in one line to avoid mines, but sometimes they would, step on a mine. And when there's a comrade who would, not comrade, how do you say that? A friend, a soldier,
friend,
another
yes.
soldier who would step on a mine, everybody knew exactly what would happen next, right? That his body would explode and blood would be spilled everywhere. But he said, even though your brain knows that, the moment that the soldier would lift up his foot, he would be pushed up by the pressure of the mine, and the body would just stand midair. And that moment, the soldier looks like an angel, and your eyes cannot help but see the beauty of that moment. And then, of course, the next second, not even the next second, the next split second, the body would explode. And he said that what I understood is that we should allow ourselves to see that moment of beauty so that we will stand up again and walk and try to find that beauty and protect that beauty amidst atrocity and horrors. And I think beauty is, there's one picture of the Vietnamese War. As you know, there were so many pictures of this war because, beauty, gone, which is quite famous, is the little girl running in the middle of the highway. And I think of all the pictures, why this picture stayed on our mind, I think it's because the picture in itself was beautiful. If you look at it, the framing, everything, it was just perfect. And because it was beautiful, it caught our eyes, and so we became curious about knowing who was this little girl. And I've read many pieces of journalists talking about this event, and the nurse who took care of her was Canadian, and that's why she's now living in Canada.
Right.
And the nurse said that this little girl was not the first one who was burned by Nepal. There were many little girls. But it's just, not many little girls, but many children, many people who got burned. But that picture was so perfect. And I think that's the beauty, that really caught our eyes. Because we cannot relate. I think our brain cannot relate to something horrific because we had not lived it. So we can only kind of listen to it, but it's still arm's length. But beauty, we have all experienced beauty, so somehow it would talk to us. And more how is it, contemporary or another picture that I think really stayed on our mind and changed a little bit the way that we see the Syrian crisis is the little boy, the Alan on the beach. And again, I think it's a perfect picture. It's so beautiful. The face of the baby was just peaceful, sleeping there, and it could be our babies, right? And that picture changed everything, because the next day you have many pictures of that same little boy, but with the Coast Guards, with the boats, with the life vests and everything, and we don't remember because it was no longer as beautiful as the first picture. So I think that we should allow ourselves to use beauty as a weapon and as a vehicle to fight back atrocities and horrors. And I don't remember the question.
Thank you.
So I think that's why Tim O'Brien is important to me, because he taught me that I should allow myself to always see beauty in everything.
Thank you, Kim. I would like to welcome those who just joined us. It's good to have you with us. Can I ask you, Kim, to read an extract from Rue now?
Oh.
Would that be possible?
I'm really, my English, sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not so much there.
It's there, believe me.
And today, I just feel that it's not so much there. And so I'll read you on, a passage about how I learned English. I have never studied in English. I learned it only on the streets. Yeah, that's how you say it?
Yes.
Yeah, on the street.
Yes.
When I worked as a lawyer, I had to use a lot of English, and so when I speak in English, I'm harsh. I'm like a businesswoman, like, like a lawyer.
Give it a try.
So I'll tell you how. Well, this passage is a true story. This is not all the book. Not everything in the book is true. Only the good stories are true, and all the bad stories are not true. So now you know. Or you just choose whatever you want to believe that it's true, then it's true. That's what happened with my family when they read it. When they like it and they say, oh, you're talking about me? And when it's not, it doesn't fit with what they think of themselves, and they go like, oh, it's fiction. She says whatever. And so this part is true. My mother wanted me to learn French as fast as possible, English too, because my mother tongue had become not exactly insufficient, but useless. Starting in my second year in Quebec, she sent me to a military garrison of Anglophone cadets. It was a way that I could learn English for free, she told me. But she was wrong. It wasn't free. I paid for it dearly. There were around 40 cadets, all of them tall, bursting with energy, and above all, teenagers. They took themselves seriously when inspecting in minute detail the fold of a collar, the angle of a beret, the shine of a boot. The oldest ones yelled at the youngest. They played at war, at the absurd, without understanding. And I didn't understand them. Nor did I understand why the name of the cadet next to me was repeated in a loop by our superior. Maybe he wanted me to remember the name of that teenage boy who was twice my height. My first conversation in English started with me saying to him at the end of the session, bye, asshole. Sorry. He's like, we're no longer sponsoring you to come to any event. I can read a more serious one if you like, or we can just talk. It's better to talk.
Thank you. Thank you for that. When I was waiting for you a few minutes ago, before starting this interview, I met a person in the corridor, and her name is V.
Yes.
And V is the title of your third novel. I read V myself last month in July when I was in Canada visiting our children with my wife, Violette, who is with us here tonight. And it took me just a few days, very frankly, because it grabbed me. I just loved it.
It's very short. That's why.
Yeah, I was busy during my holiday. But it's short, but you just go through it, you see. And V speaks about love. It speaks about origins. It speaks about hope as well. So my question will be the title, V. How come you selected this name? And when you look at V, when you read V, what are the meanings you associate to V?
You know, in Vietnamese, most of the names have a meaning. You know, for the boys, it would be courage, determination, light. The girls, very often, is a flower, an orchid, I don't know, kindness, white, and Snow White. You know, when you want your child to really be white, and then you call the child Snow White. And very often, the child would be exactly the contrary to the name. And I found that so funny, you know, and when you call your child white, I think it's because you are already worried that the child won't be white enough. And as you know, Vietnam was a colony of France for 100 years. And somehow, you know, we have adopted the criteria, the beauty criteria from the Western world, meaning, you know, as white as you can and the eyes as big as you can. And, well, my eyes in Vietnam are considered to be the ugliest that you can find because it's just one line. And, oh, I have to tell you, no, after I was going to tell you a funny story. And then, so V means really small, microscopic small. For example, vi trùng is a virus, that's how you call it, yeah? It has the word V in there because it expresses the size of a virus. And, but V is also the beautiful of being small. Contrary to America, you know, small is also very, well, it's beautiful actually. And if you go to Japan, for example, just recently I just come back from Tokyo, the lady who put the kimono on me to try, she tried to smooth, how do you say that? Yeah, to take my shoulders down, because she said, you know, the bigger they are, the uglier they are. So you have to just lower your shoulders, and my shoulders are just my shoulders. I can't, right? And so I wanted V to be small, because we very often forget that small is important and small is also beautiful. We always look at the big things. For example, most of the time we would say that, oh, the most beautiful day was my wedding day, and so. And I think the wedding day wouldn't exist if you don't have all the other smaller days. And we forget those smaller things. And so I wanted V to be small. So I started off writing V as a small girl and short and quiet and all of that. But then she grew in the book and she became really tall. And so I had to go back and change everything. So you see, when you give a name to a child, it goes the other way. So it didn't work at all. And most of the time I never know what I write. Very often, now today, if I can tell you more about the books and how I write, it's because of the journalists. I've learned a lot from them. Every time that they ask questions, I just, you know, learn from them and then repeat it to the next talk. But in Spain, in Madrid, I had 14 interviews between 9 o'clock and 6 in the evening, and I had the same interpreter the whole time. And at the end of the day, she asked me, how come I didn't give the same answers to journalist 3 and journalist 7 when they asked exactly the same questions? I said, did you hear the journalist 5? His analysis was so much better. And so, so I took that analysis and I gave it to journalist 7. So at the end of the day, I sounded so much more intelligent, you know, because I never know. I try to explain the book, but yeah, whatever. Don't believe me.
Kim, it's almost 6:30.
Oh, no.
Would it be possible to read a small extract from V?
Okay. So V, you see, like this character was supposed to be just on one page, but then she grew and became like the second most important character in the book. And I'll read it to you, and then I'll explain to you after. No, I'll explain to you first. Because you know, our eyes are really small, and my eyes, you know, they open like garage doors, right? Pulling up like this. So the 3 eyelashes that I have, they go under. And once I went to a TV show, and the makeup artist insisted on giving me eyelashes. So he put on fake eyelashes. The problem is when I opened my eyes, the eyelashes went under. And we were too late for him to take out, and the show was live. And so I went in front of the camera with, you know, wipers in front of my eyes going like this. So anyway, so this is a true story. And so I didn't see anything. There's just very many wipers going, you know. And for 1 hour, it was a very long show.
Are you okay now?
Yes,
okay.
yes, I can see you. No, I've given up. Most makeup artists, they don't bother because I said, you know, there's nothing to do with my eyes. But then this one, he said, I can turn you into, you know, like a model. And I accepted, of course, and it didn't work out. So, Ha is, well, the character Ha is much younger than my mother. At the beginning of the 1970s in Saigon, she was the perfect modern woman in the American style with her very short dresses that showed off the slanted, heart-shaped birthmark high up on her left thigh. I remember her irresistible platform shoes in the hallway of our house, which struck me as decadent, or at least gave me a new perspective on the world when I slipped them on. Her false eyelashes, thick with mascara, transformed her eyes into 2 spiky-haired rambutans. I don't know if you know this fruit. It has hair everywhere. She was our Twiggy, with her apple green and turquoise eyeshadow, 2 colors that clashed with her coppery skin. She was unlike most of the young girls who avoided the sun in order to set themselves apart from the peasants in the rice fields, who had to roll their pants up to their knees and endure the violent bright light. Ha bared her skin at the swimming pool of the very exclusive Cercle Sportif, where she gave me swimming lessons. She preferred American freedom to the elegance of French culture, which gave her the courage to participate in the first Miss Vietnam competition, even though she was an English teacher. And I talked about her because, you know, mascara is something so banal in our world, but in Vietnam, in a country at war, mascara was quite scarce and expensive and useless to most of us. But I remember this friend, she was my aunt's friend, and when she came, she was very special because she had a lot of eyelashes and big eyes, you know, like they open up. Well, her eyelids open up like like the Western people, and so I was always amazed with her eyes and having all these eyelashes, and she was very proud of having these eyelashes, so she would buy mascaras and put them on, and she was always worried how would I say it? She would not waste it, so she didn't wash the mascaras. You know, she would just add on. And in order to not lose the mascaras, she would sleep between 2 pillows, right? To make sure that her eyes would not go on the pillow. And
it's quite a technique, yeah.
Yes, but it does, you know, it does represent a period, an era in Vietnam and Saigon at that time, in our history. And yeah, so that's it. So that's how serious my book is.
Thank you. It's past 6:30, but one last question, if I may. Your last book, Secrets from My Vietnamese Kitchen, Simple Recipes from My Many Mothers. Let's open our appetite a little bit. We're close to dinner. Can you speak a little bit about the origin of this wonderful book? By the way, it has a wonderful presentation, a wonderful design. it's just a beautiful and gorgeous book.
But it's sold out. They don't have any.
Well, yes.
Sorry.
So you will need to order a few. But can you speak about the origin of the book?
The origin is that I have my mother. They are six sisters and two brothers, and all the girls are really, really beautiful. And I grew up with my aunts, and we are very close. And at one point, we have dinner. We have many dinners together, and we're very, very close. And maybe because I'm 50 now, and all of a sudden, I was there and I said, oh God, we are all alive. And as an immigrant family, I think we all accepted in advance that we would lose somebody in the family at one point or the other, one way or the other. And I said, how lucky I am that they are all alive and that we are still so close. And I said I had to do something in homage of these aunts who raised me alongside with my mother. And so at the beginning, it was supposed to be just a Christmas project that I wanted to have their pictures taken, but then books, recipes. It was not in our culture, in the Vietnamese culture, before the social media, YouTube, and all of that, where we share recipes. Back then, recipes, you had to keep it as a secret, because if your neighbor has the same recipe than you, then she can steal your husband, right? That's the belief. And so you don't share recipes. You have to only give it to your daughters and sisters and the women in the family. And so it's not in our, even now, my mom's, when she has friends over, when you like a recipe, you don't ask for it, because then you would be forcing her to lie to you. Right? A recipe book written in Vietnamese for the Vietnamese, you know in advance that there's a mistake, right? There's an error in there, and the work is like an enigma that you have to find the mistake, right? That would, and the best books are when the mistake is so tiny but pivotal to your recipe that you miss it, and so it was not spontaneous for me to write a recipe book, but it became a recipe book. Sorry.
Can we open the floor now to your questions? We have 2 microphones. I would just invite you to
if you don't
share.
have a question, I'll tell you a sexy story.
Oh, if you have. Well, we have a first question. Sorry.
You're so happy that you're going to ask me a question.
I'm doing this because my wife is so shy about this. But my mother-in-law was born in Saigon in 1945, and she met my father-in-law while he was a civilian Defense Department worker over there. Came to the United States in '73, and then subsequently he helped bring over 15 or 20, I think, relatives in the late '70s, right over to rural West Texas. But I had a lot of conversations with them over the years about, now that, especially since the '90s, with Vietnam opening up, would you like to go back? Would you like to see what happened? And they both said, no, they weren't, because there was so much tragedy involved, so much heartbreak, that they just were not interested in going back and saying, my mother-in-law was not interested, still not interested to this day. I was wondering what your relationship is with the country of Vietnam, with Saigon and all of that, and how you feel about it to this day.
When I was a lawyer, I was sent there on a project, and I had a chance to go back, but at the same time not go back, because I had never known Hanoi. Vietnam was divided into 2, right? And there was no communication between the North and the South, and I was born in Saigon. So, and I thought I was going back to a country that I kind of knew, but actually no, Hanoi was a different country. The north of Vietnam was a different country, a different language, different everything. And so I rediscovered Vietnam. And I must say that I have made peace with Vietnam because I had that time to go back. And all of a sudden you hear people telling their own story with perspective, 20 years later, 40 years later, 50 years later. And then all of a sudden you hear mothers from both sides telling stories about their loss You know, a mother from the north or the mother from the south, when you lose a child, it's just a child. It's not a communist soldier or an American, backed, how do you say that, a South Vietnam soldier. They were just kids. You know, when you think about it, they were 14, 15, 18, living in the jungle, walking for years without knowing much, right? And so you can make peace because you go back and you realize that we were all victims of a war which were decided by a couple of people up there. And you can see the documentary by Ken, yes, and you can hear that the country or the people are just, how do you say that, the pieces of a chess game. You know, we were nothing at all, actually. So if we continue to hate each other, then we would give, how would I say, we would continue that war. So I think we have, well, the younger generation anyway, that we don't carry so much of the history. I think that we can be part of this peace process or making peace with the past. That's how I see it.
Thank you. Madame.
Thank you. So it's really amazing to hear you talk. I teach English in a high school, and we teach the things they carried and Rue together.
Oh.
So you've answered one of the two questions that always comes up, which is, do I think that Kim Thúy has read the things they carried?
I know it by heart almost.
So now I'll be able to say yes, so that's amazing.
Telling a war story is never about war. Blah, blah.
Tell a true war story. Yeah. But another question that comes up a lot is a little deeper, but we often have conversations about whether it seems from your book that it's possible to ever feel at home someplace when you have had the experience of exile as a child. And I don't know if you have thoughts about that.
About exile?
Yeah, one about whether you feel at home in the world and how. They're very curious about that.
I feel at home very quickly anywhere. I've been here less than 24 hours, I think, and I'm already at home. And I said to a friend, I said, oh yeah, I'll go for breakfast at the same place tomorrow. Comme d'habitude, how do you say that?
As usual.
As usual. I said, but you've been there only for 24 hours. What do you mean as usual? And very often I would say, oh yeah, let's meet at home, but it's a hotel. And so I think it did give me not the feeling not being part of anywhere, but more like being part of everywhere. So I'm happy with everywhere. Funny enough, you know, and I was gonna say I've been to Sweden 5 times now for the books, and I feel like Sweden is my country, or they think that I'm Swedish. You know, they have really adopted me there. But then I've just come back from Japan as well, and again, it's very home to me. So I think it's the contrary. It has given me that power. But of course, home today is where my children are. Wherever they live, then it's my home, and they're still in my house, and I still cook for them, and so that's definitely home to me. But we should talk. If you want me to chat with your students,
Ooh.
I'll be happy to.
Yes.
Yes?
Right.
Yes, Skype.
Okay.
And I will have more time to talk.
Amazing.
This
Thank you
is
so
too
much.
short.
Thank you.
Yes.
Please.
Hi, first off, thank you so much. This has been a fabulous presentation. I'm really curious about the cookbook. So did you put errors in your recipes? And like, how did you get all these recipes? Are these all inherited from your family? And then how did your family feel about you using them then?
No, there are no mistakes because I didn't know how to make a recipe. So I had to hire a food stylist so that she can cook. And at one point she asked me for the caramelized pork. And the recipes you find in these books are so simple. They are eaten by the Vietnamese every day. So it's not a secret in that sense. And she said, oh, how long for the caramel? I said, well, up until the color of dark chocolate, 70%. And she said, we cannot write that. And, but I think it's more precise than the number of minutes, right? Because you need to, because the caramelized pork, you have to go a little bit darker than the color that you wish to have, because as soon as you add a little bit of water and the meat in, the color would lighten, right? So you have to go darker. And so it took us a long time to have the recipes ready, because I kept giving her wrong references. And just to go, yeah, fish sauce, just like that. Tuk, tuk, tuk.
A last question, please.
Yeah, thank you for your talk. You talked a lot about your experiences during the Vietnam War. Of course, now the USA and Vietnam are the best of friends. Wanted to ask you, how do the Chinese people see, how do the Vietnamese see the Chinese now?
Oh, now it's a very complex question, and it will take me an hour to answer. But as you know, China is really next door to us. China is very present in Vietnam. That's the least that I can say. Like everywhere in the world, Africa, for example. And I think the situation in Vietnam is very close to Africa. In that sense, is that the Chinese government has invested a lot of attention to Vietnam, because as you know, Vietnam is the second largest rice exporter in the world. So we call it the rice basket. You know, the south of Vietnam is the rice basket for a lot of people, for that region. And so one example, and you see it, the Chinese government has given money to rebuild the highway that goes from north to the south of Vietnam.
We're running out of time. I'm sorry. I would need to conclude.
We can continue at my hotel if you like. I'm in room 901.
I would like to thank our signs interpreter. Thank you
so
very much. Thank you all. Thank you, Kim Thuy.
Thank you so much for being here.